I've noticed this quite early on, a few years back when AI first became more popular and more realistic, but there's this feeling I get when looking at AI generated pictures, and I'm not talking about art, I'm talking about pictures that are supposed to look real, photos that were actually taken by humans. And it's not the sort of doom that you feel when looking at AI and thinking, well, what the hell is going to happen to society? It's more of a sadness. I feel more numb. And it's not really uncanny valley because that is mostly about something looking not human. And the thing is, I'm not even afraid. It's more like a sadness, like I said. And I found this feeling kind of strange, so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper to find out what exactly it means. And I also saw a couple of articles that might be able to explain this feeling that I'm having. I just realized that it looks like my head is huge. That is not the case. I'm just leaning forward. By the way, I started having this feeling when I looked at pictures on Pinterest of room decorations for inspiration, and I, for example, saw this picture and it looked very realistic. If it weren't this, well, unrealistic kind of room that, like, no room like this exists, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't even have noticed that it was AI. I was kind of upset about that, but I was also upset about the fact that I wanted this room to exist in real life, but it didn't. There was no story behind it. It was made up, and I couldn't have it. It wasn't real. So I was kind of just sad about this emptiness that I felt when I looked at this picture. And it's not like, for example, you can draw pictures or paint pictures or create pictures with CGI that are very realistic looking, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a real one and a created one. But it's kind of different with AI because it feels like it was created by something, an entity, but this entity isn't real, so it just kind of makes you feel empty. And I can't really explain this feeling yet, but we're gonna try to dig deeper and find out what it means. So I have a couple of theories that I made up and also found on the internet with some users and articles that I'm going to be talking about today. So the first one is uncanny valley. So I already said in the beginning that it's not uncanny valley because I'm not scared, but there's something similar to uncanny valley that I might be experiencing, and some of you as well. And I'm not talking about uncanny valley in the sense that you look at something that is human but not quite, and then you're afraid of it because it's this natural instinct that the brain has, being afraid of something that is not quite human but very realistic, like for example pictures like these. I'm talking about a feeling when you look at a picture, a generally AI created picture that seems very real, it looks real, but there's something off about it. And there is this thing where you have uncanny valley exactly like this. You feel odd or sad looking at a picture that is realistic but not quite real, or you know that it is not real. A user on Quora worded it like this: it's an example of the uncanny valley as applied to other situations. The brain is amazingly good at identifying and predicting known patterns. It knows what artwork is supposed to look like. It knows what music is supposed to sound like. The AI-generated versions are close to, but not quite like what the brain expects. Because the brain cannot easily classify what it is experiencing, it freaks out a little bit. This protected us, for example, when we had to fear tigers and other things that were able to hide nearby and could be dangerous. Not eating that food that looked like it might be okay but wasn't quite right for whatever reason prevented us from poisoning ourselves. To sum it up, the brain is unconsciously afraid of anything that isn't quite right. But why is that? Like this user already suggested, it might have to do with protection. A while back, it might have protected us from tigers that might have been hiding in plain sight, or from food that was poisonous, but we were only able to tell because the food didn't look quite right. Also, AI oftentimes looks very perfect, like for example this room couldn't exist in real life because it's just simply too perfect. And that's just unsettling, just like a perfectly symmetrical face would also be unsettling, or the face of a doll that looks very realistic. But I already mentioned this at the beginning, when I look at these pictures I don't feel scared, I don't feel intimidated by them, I'm not afraid that there's something hiding in plain sight. It's more of a sadness or emptiness that I feel, and this feeling can be explained by a different theory. Look at this picture for example. It shows a normal gathering of people. It looks almost entirely real. So what's the problem here? I don't know if you're actually feeling this too, but when I look at this picture, I feel that emptiness that I talked about in the beginning. You might not be able to see the problem because it's not that obvious, but what this picture really lacks is a soul and a story. But that is what all AI pictures don't have. a story and a soul. This is not a snapshot of a moment with a backstory. None of the people in this picture are actually real. There is no soul to any of them, and none of them have a story. Nothing is happening in this moment because it was created by nothing, from nothing. It didn't happen. It didn't occur. There is no backstory. There's nothing that happens after because it's not happening. The picture just feels flat and empty. Even though the people look like they were doing something, the people look like they have a story, they actually don't, and we know that. And the picture looks like it's supposed to have a soul because it's so realistic, but it doesn't, and that makes me sad, I feel like. And that brings us to the next theory. The fact that AI generated pictures that have no story, no backstory, nothing that happens afterward, simply exist and are so easy to create nowadays just kind of makes me sad, because it makes real moments that actually did occur and that actually did have a story with people who have souls meaningless now. What's so beautiful about pictures is that they capture a real moment. That's the point of a camera. It's supposed to take a picture of something that actually happened, a snapshot. There are no emotions to people in this picture. They might look like they were having emotions, but it just feels so flat and empty. And you could say this for humans, obviously, but also with this room. It's not real. It doesn't have a story. Sometimes what makes a room special is not what it looks like, but how it was created. How you know that people had to put an effort into making this. And with AI pictures, there is no effort. You just put a prompt into an AI software and it's going to create that picture. And this is not some sort of criticism on the fact that AI is easy to create. It's just sort of an explanation on why we feel this way, or at least I do. And by the way, obviously this can also be applied to art in general, like paintings or drawings. As an artist and writer myself, I feel like it's kind of sad to see AI artists kind of succeed with their AI generated art, because it just kind of feels like we're losing the point of art. The point of art isn't to look very beautiful. Obviously that's also a point of art, because like you can hang it up in your room and look at it if you want to, but it's more about the story. Like for example, the most famous paintings these days are not famous because they look so realistic or because they look so great. It's mostly because they have a story to tell. And this even goes for hyperrealism. Some might say, well, that's not really art because you're just copying something. Well, it kind of is about that process of copying something exactly as it is in a picture. Hyperrealism is so special because a person created a realistic image from scratch. And I personally love drawing realism because it's just so fun, and I definitely feel like it's an art. But if you just create an AI generated picture that looks somewhat like it was drawn by a real person, it lacks that soul, that story behind the picture. And we're kind of losing the point, I feel like. When suddenly everything's possible, somehow everything becomes meaningless. A similar thing happened, by the way, for example, when Marvel introduced the multiverse. Nobody's death was ever really seen as meaningful again, because the character could just be reintroduced as another version of themselves, like for example with Gamora. And this kind of made everything meaningless and flat, in my opinion. Like, I know that there can still be some meaningful stories that are created by it. Like, for example, AI can also still be very helpful in ways. Like, I personally use ChatGPT on a day-to-day basis to do mundane tasks like research or something. Obviously, there is something that you need to consider, which is like the environment and the energy that it needs to like be able to function. But this is not like a criticism on AI, so we're not going to be talking about that. But regarding the multiverse, the fact still stands. Sometimes when there are endless possibilities, like with the multiverse, that are easy to achieve, it makes the whole system collapse in on itself, at least emotionally. It doesn't evoke the same emotions. Maybe it even has the opposite effect, because creating art that looks like it's supposed to have meaning, that looks like it's supposed to have a story, makes every other piece of art feel a little bit more meaningless. I'm not saying that it actually is meaningless, because like obviously I consider art to be very meaningful, especially if it was not created by AI, but it just kind of evokes that emotion of emptiness because it just was created from nothing and you didn't have to do anything for it. It doesn't have a story, it doesn't have a soul. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about something that I read on Reddit. A few users actually talked about having physical reactions to seeing AI generated pictures a few years ago. Here are some examples. Some people recall feeling sick, strange, or getting chills all over their bodies, and they explain this with trypophobia, and that is like a strong aversion or feeling of disgust towards clustered holes or repetitive patterns. I think a lot of you might know about this. I don't completely understand how it's related to AI, but I know that there are some very obvious patterns with AI that it uses, so this could be due to that. Like, there are no holes or weird patterns that are like actually like round in AI. So I don't completely understand it, but I think I kind of sort of get the point. But I think the sensations that we feel that are negative towards AI are still mostly due to the psychological concepts that I explained just now. And as we know, psychology is obviously very tightly connected to body sensations, and like for example, like fear can make you have chills or goosebumps, and sadness can make you cry, or happiness can make you cry. Like, psychology oftentimes causes physical sensations. But at the end of the day, these are all just assumptions. So let me know what you think in the comments, and if I got anything wrong, or if you disagree or agree with something that I said. I am very open for suggestions. This is just, like I said, my opinion, what I figured out, and what I feel like. Maybe you have a completely different feeling when looking at AI generated pictures, but I personally feel sad. Maybe you could even consider subscribing to my channel, maybe sleep on it, but it would be really great if you could do that. Okay, bye!